Happy 3-year anniversary for Kingdom Rush Vengeance. This game just got a substantial content update, starring 3 new levels, a new tower, and a new hero. And that new hero is Dinyan. Feel free to explain how to actually pronounce his name in the comments. Anyways, this dragon costs $5.99, so we need to look at his stats and abilities to see whether or not he is worth this price. I'm also going to tentatively rank him among the other 57 heroes across the series. I have gotten to play with him at level 10 in every elite stage so far, multiple times, with the exception of the newest stages. Right now, the new levels seem to destroy your save file, so I'm not playing any more of the game or getting any additional footage. So take my placement of the hero with a grain of salt. I'll just have to make a follow-up video if necessary to reposition him. But for now, let's try to be as thorough as possible as we delve into his stats. As always, these are his stats at level 10 with max soul point upgrades. To begin, he has 578 HP and 0 armor or magic resistance. It's safe to assume that he doesn't have resistance to any of the other 500 damage types in this series either. This makes him pretty durable. As a dragon hero, he doesn't get hit by melee attacks. There's no reason for him to ever die, but if he does, he has a 22-second respawn time. As for his base attack, it works in a pretty unique way. First, the hero summons a cloud above the enemy he is targeting, which is always going to be the one closest to the exit in his range. Then, that cloud will strike down lightning, dealing 21 to 49 magic damage. This damage is pretty low, and to make it worse, it takes 2 seconds to recharge. That means he has an average DPS of 10.5 to 24.5. It's really weak at killing a single enemy, especially for Vengeance. The best part about it is that the lightning also stuns the enemy for 2/3 of a second. This doesn't make up for how bad it is at dealing damage, but it's possible for his abilities to redeem it. We'll just have to see. As for his speed, it is 42. There's only one hero who has the same speed, and that's Jigu. His speed is tied for the slowest in the series. However, he has a pretty big range to make up for it. Like all dragons, he has a blind spot underneath him. A range of 100 around him marks the space that he can't attack. The space that he can attack is anything outside of that 100 range and within a range of 400, sort of like a donut. 400 range is really far, so you don't have to move the hero around to catch enemies. However, this does pose another problem. Because of his massive range, his preference for attacking enemies closest to the exit makes it hard to aim at a specific enemy. Usually with ranged characters, you can move them to a place where only the enemies you want to attack are in range. But when a hero has massive range, you can't isolate the enemies you want to target as easily. Anyways, the main takeaways from his stats are that he's not going to die unless you're truly careless, his attack has really bad DPS, and his speed is the worst in the game. But none of these traits actually mean anything just yet. If anything, having weak stats is an excuse for all of a hero's power to be pumped into their abilities. His first ability is his passive skill, Kongming Lantern. Whenever an enemy dies within a huge range around Dinyan, an additional 1 gold is generated. Unlike Barisad's passive, which only applies to enemies killed by Barasad with his basic attack, this skill activates whenever an enemy dies in range. You will get far more gold this way. Unlike Blackthorn's looting ability, it has a much larger range of 400, but gives less gold per enemy. All things considered, it still probably falls short of the amount of gold that Blackthorn can earn, but without needing so much intensive micro to be effective. You can plop Dinyan down in a good central location and watch the gold pile up. He can attack and use other skills at the same time, whereas Blackthorn would need to be moved around constantly to be in range of dying enemies, not able to do much attacking himself. I also have a soft spot for anything that can generate more money. It's the reason I initially started calling every wave early when I first got into these games. I don't think I need to explain why extra gold is useful, but for the sake of catharsis, imagine how much gold you can generate off of the spam of enemies in the first Anurian level. With that extra gold, you can purchase better upgrades for towers, blowing up wardens of lava fissures or artillery or whatever else you choose to buy. It's a great combo for speedrun strategies and allows you to get upgrades sooner, increasing the overall power of your defense faster. Let's move on to his first active ability, Lightning Strike. This skill summons a cloud that shoots a bolt of lightning, similarly to his base attack. But this lightning bolt would chain 3, 5, and then 6 enemies total, dealing 58 magic damage to each one and stunning for 2/3 of a second. At max power, this is 348 magic damage total. For an 18-second cooldown, this is about 19 damage per second rounded down. That's a good number for one ability. It just won't always be this strong if you can't get 6 distinct enemies in range of the skill. The enemies need to be distinct because the lightning can't chain back to one that was already struck. Also, as a ranged attack, it's not something you can really aim that precisely, so it's best to just treat this like an extra attack that just happens every once in a while as you play normally. His next upgrade, Lord of the Storm, is a passive that improves his base attack. Instead of generating a single cloud on a 2-second cooldown, he gains an additional cloud for each level of the skill. At max level, he has 4 clouds to work with. This quadruples his damage, and thus his DPS. Doing the math, he should now deal 42 to 98 magic damage per second. He effectively stores up to 4 attacks at a time. However, he can only shoot 1 at a time, so the slight space between attacks can lower his DPS by a little. Since each cloud stuns enemies, it allows him to stun a single target far better, or multiple enemies. He can adapt and hit new enemies that pass up his original target on the path, stunning them as well. He doesn't space out the strikes long enough to permanently stall a single target naturally. However, if there aren't enough enemies in range to use all 4 clouds, then some of them will be on cooldown while others are not. This can desync the attacks to space them out better for stunning. It's so hard to pull off that it basically comes down to luck. Still, this upgrade to his attack was needed. He doesn't do as much total damage with his basic attacks as Murgla and especially not Ice Cult, but he's still going to do a lot as long as the enemies don't have magic resistance. His third skill is Divine Rain. This triggers in a range of 220, which is about half of his attack range, and it provides 12 health per half second to allies in the AoE for 5 seconds. This totals to 240 health per unit, assuming that they stay in range and don't get killed or time out partway through. For a 15-second cooldown, it beats out most other healing abilities, but I personally still don't really like it. It's not that you shouldn't upgrade it or anything, but the short range clashes with the rest of his playstyle. Ideally, you put Dinyan in a central spot that can reach as many enemies as possible, getting the most gold and dealing the most damage without having to move him. But this shorter ranged ability forces him to get closer to troops, which is doubly bad because that's likely where other enemies are as well. Since he can't attack enemies who are too close to him, it forces this balancing act with his range that pretty much every flying hero puts you through. I just don't bother trying to optimize the usage of this ability. Most likely, it will be for nothing in the end, as the AoE is a bit too small for units to stay inside of when they move to fight in melee combat. But if it does get to heal some allies, then that is usually a good thing. The best way to put it is that Divine Rain can be a little useful, but often doesn't get to be. Supreme Wave is his final active skill before his hero spell. This sends a wave down every possible path, covering a range of about 100 and stunning for 4 seconds. It deals no damage and has a 21-second cooldown time. It's really a shame that all it does is stun enemies, because it drags the ability down by a lot. It has a very short range of 45 to 200, and needs at least 3 enemies in range to activate. For the same reasons as Divine Rain, it's hard to want to move the hero from a place that can reach more enemies just to optimize this skill. It's really cool that it can go down every path that the hero is currently flying over, but it's just to stun enemies for 4 seconds. I wouldn't want to sacrifice a better vantage point to aim this skill better, but if you can find a good spot that gets the best out of both worlds, then more power to you. His hero spell is Son of the Storm. Select an area on the path to summon a golden dragon that can shoot at enemies. Unlike most summons, it doesn't disappear on a strict duration. Instead, it has ammo. At max level, it can shoot up to 15 times, each one dealing 120 to 180 magic damage. After that last shot has expired, it dissipates. The only other way to remove a dragon is to summon more than 10 at a time, at which point the oldest one expires. These behave like a tower, unable to be targeted by enemies while they shoot down at them. With a 33-second cooldown, it's quite easy to spawn a lot of these on the map. They make for a great safety net when placed further back, sniping at enemies who slip through your defenses. If you use them for purely offensive purposes, they also work wonders. 120 damage times 15 shots and divided by 33 seconds gives it a minimum of 54.5 DPS. That calculation doesn't take into account magic resistance or overkill, but it also doesn't account for charging the ability faster by calling waves early. 54 minimum to 82 maximum DPS is really good. It carries the hero by a lot. He makes up for all the times that he couldn't max out the damage of Lightning Strike by dealing so much damage in such a straightforward way here. I would compare this to Wilbur, who just keeps on executing high damage attacks consistently. However, I can't say that I would compare him to Wilbur in terms of raw power. All of Dinyan's attacks deal magic damage, which makes him arguably the least versatile dragon in the series. He does have the potential for high stalling power thanks to all of these stuns though. He keeps enemies stunned for a really high percentage of the time when he spaces out all of his abilities. This doesn't always get to happen though, and it's not easy to control the situation to make him more consistent due to his nature as a ranged hero, just throwing out his abilities when they're ready. Even if it was easy though, nothing beats Ice Cult's hero spell at stalling power. That's why any synergy that he has with stalling towers ultimately pales in comparison to the superior heroes. If you're focusing on his fun factor, his passive and hero spell are the main attractions. These two skills are both really good and really fun. It's hard to beat the cash generation of his lanterns, and his hero spell creates what are effectively auto turrets on the battlefield. Dinyan is sort of like an airship, moving slowly and just launching out attack after attack without much player input. He's almost a hands-free hero after you find a good position for him. I would argue that this makes him less fun, but I know that some people might prefer less micro for their hero, so make the decision for yourself. In the end, I would rank him at 21st place, just after Doom Tank. The reason is that Dinyan has a better basic attack than most heroes. With upgrades, it does great damage, and it can distribute across 4 different attacks, making it less likely to overkill and more useful against different numbers of enemies. His abilities are pretty mediocre though. Only one does damage, and it depends on having many enemies in range to do good damage. The heal is just strong enough for a heal, but ultimately not that useful by nature of being a heal. Supreme Wave is just a stun, so it's nothing to write home about. But it's hard to beat that passive gold generation of his innate and the high DPS of his hero spell. If his other skills were more significant and helpful, then I could see him getting slightly higher on the list. But really, doing pure magic damage and not having anything else that insane about him is what holds him back from being in the top 20. The heroes above him all have things about them that make them truly special. Dinyan is sort of special, but not to the same extent. He's strong enough to get the job done, more effectively than the majority of heroes, but I wouldn't recommend him for his raw power when stronger heroes exist. So those are my thoughts on Dinyan. I couldn't get much footage of him because I was afraid of playing the game more. The current bug that bricks your game is really bad, by far the worst bug in any Ironhide game ever. But I hope that it's still clear to you how he functions as a hero and why I've ranked him where I did. Stay tuned for my review of the new tower and whether or not you should buy it. Until then, have a great day.